Don't eat out if you can't afford it. Okay, we won't. After reading that post about entitled wait staff, it reminded me of what I experienced new to North America. At the time, I had just moved from a small village in Europe. When I had moved to Canada, I met up with others from my tiny area in Europe. Being from the same little country, we all became close. I had become friendly with a next-door neighbor, who was a waitress at a mid-high-level restaurant in this town. She told me I should stop by, and so I did. I brought my friends along, and it became a thing, where 9 to 12 of us would come in and eat and be served by her. At least one a week, every single week, often 2 times a week. I asked if that was okay, but she never seemed overwhelmed, and we often caught her just chilling at the front desk once she was done with the initial plates. More on that later. Again, we are not from a tipping country, so I initially was going to tip 15%. But then I was graciously informed by the host that an auto 18% tip was added to the bill for groups larger than 6. Okay, great, didn't have to figure out how much to tip. After almost 3 months or so of this, she stops by as I am taking out my trash. One thing to know about her is that she seems nice, but also has no tact, and can have a bossy demeanor. She tells us she enjoys having us as customers and loves seeing us enjoy the food, but that we should be tipping 20% minimum, heavy emphasis on the minimum. Also good tippers would give at least 30%. I am a bit stunned out of all the things she had to talk about. It was that. So I simply say, I am sorry. Okay. She finishes off with her signature sweet smile and the words, "Sorry, hun, if you can't afford to eat out, then you shouldn't be doing so." Yeah, if she was polite, and said something like, "BTW, it's customary to tip XXX if we do a good job. I understand you might not know the customs here," but then I would have understood. But many times I remembered she was inattentive as a waitress. We'd often have to flag her down after making eye contact, where she'd just wait behind a counter. Like I said, 20% was not out of the question. It was the way she said it. So I mentioned this encounter to my friends, and after a little talk we realize we can't afford that. No, not if we also want to be able to purchase other goods such as fine wines, cheeses we love, and the like. See, we aren't poor, but not rich either. These weekly dinners were little luxuries that we splurged for the sake of friends and feeling special in a fancy restaurant. It didn't break our bank, but it was still a significant amount of money. To tip her properly, and the fact that we all realized were other little things in life we'd rather spend our precious money on, we decided it was too much. Across all of us, it was hundreds of dollars in tips alone per week. That's a lot for us. We could use that money to rent a pull-hole fishing tours, which are very expensive, etc. So we did what any responsible adult did. We stopped buying what we couldn't afford. It was far cheaper to host our gatherings in someone's house and do a potluck, or make a deli board, etc. Now discussing this with other neighbors, I hear that she has said something to that sort to other people in the neighborhood, invite out to eat, then tell them off later if the tip is too low. They have always said same thing, 20% minimum, service wasn't the best, very hurried, not very attentive, etc., and the entitlement. Anyways, we stopped eating at the restaurant and having her as the waitress. Mind you, I never stopped saying hi to her, kept up my pleasantries, etc. But now, after we all of a sudden stopped coming in, she had a scowl on her face when she'd see me, kept her responses quick, and stopped saying hi as much. And then, about a month after we stopped, one of the other neighbors mentioned to me how she was complaining that her tips weren't great anymore, and that she couldn't afford her to get more fillers for her cheeks at the new medical spa down road. Oh well, like you said, don't eat out if you can't afford it.
Refused database access and told to submit tickets. So I submit tickets. Hey, I have been meaning to type this up for a while. This happened at my last job back in 2018. To give some background, I was working as a data analyst at a company in the edtech sector. For one of my projects, I created a report that we could give to the sales team that they could then use when asking clients to renew their contract. Clients were typically school systems or individual schools. The report was all graphs. Even adults like pretty pictures, and it showed the client's data on how teachers' students were using the product. And our sales guys could show, hey, X% of your students and teacher are using this X times a week, so you should sign a new contract with us. I developed this report for our biggest client and had the top people in sales all put an input when developing it. The big client renewed, which was great. They loved the report and wanted to use it for all renewals, and we had 5,000 plus clients. I had to automate the process, and everything seemed peachy until I hit a problem. The data for the report was pulled from our database, MSSQL if you are curious. Now I was in the research department, and I did not have access to the database. Instead, our IT team had access to the database. If I wanted data, I had to put in a ticket, name all the data points I wanted, and I could only name one client per ticket. Also, IT did their work in sprints, which are basically 2-week periods of work. The tickets were always added to the next sprint, so I ended up having to wait to the 4 weeks for data. This was fine for the big client report, but now that I was running this report for all renewals, the ticket system was not going to work. Now, if you have worked with sales, you know they don't typically plan out to the 4 weeks ahead. At least they didn't at this company. I reached out to IT and requested direct access to the database, so I could stop putting in tickets and just query the data myself. Well, that was immediately denied. All data requests will be filled by only IT, and as a research person, I needed to stay in my lane. You might see where this is going. I wasn't happy, and sales wasn't happy with the delay, but there was nothing anyone could do. So I reached out to one of the sales managers to discuss a solution. Since data was going to take 2 to 4 weeks to arrive, could he please send me everyone that has a renewal coming up in the next 2 to 4 weeks? With 5,000 plus customers, that averages about 100 renewals a week. He smiled and understood what was going on, and happily sent me a list of 400-ish clients. Quick note, the IT team spends the day before a sprint planning the next sprint, and all tickets submitted before the sprint had to be completed during the next sprint. The sprint planning time was always Friday afternoon because the least amount of tickets rolled in. During the planning session, they would plan all the work for the next 2 weeks, for the next sprint. Any tickets that came in before 5 p.m. Friday had to be finished over the next 2 weeks. Time for the MC. Armed with my list of 400 plus clients, I figured out when the next sprint started and cleared my schedule for the day before the new IT sprint started, aka their sprint planning Friday. At about 1 ticket a minute, it was going to take about 6 hours and 40 minutes to submit all the tickets, so that's what I spent my whole Friday doing. Let's not forget, they had to get the data for all the tickets during the next sprint as long as I submitted them before 5 p.m. on Friday. That meant they had to take care of all 400 tickets in the next 2 weeks. Plus, I submitted tickets throughout their spring planning meeting, so they couldn't even plan for it all. If you are not tech savvy, this might not make sense, but if you are, let me add an extra twist to this. They used JIRA at the time, and the entire IT team had the JIRA app on their laptops. Most of them had push notifications set up so they got pinged every time a ticket was submitted. I would have paid good money to be a fly-on the wall during that meeting, watching a new ticket pop up about every minute. Okay, tech aside, done. I didn't hear a peep from them at all that Friday. To their credit, Monday I started getting data from my tickets. Now I had automated the reporting process on my end, so each report only took me a few minutes to run. I was churning out reports as quickly as I received the data without an issue, and sales was loving it. I saw tickets coming in from every member of the IT team, and during the second week, many tickets came in after working hours. So obviously they were struggling to keep up. Again, I will give them full credit. They fulfilled every single ticket. But there was a lot of long days for them. Everyone was salary, so no overtime pay either. This is, of course, on top of all the other tickets they needed to complete, so it was quite a stressful sprint. Undeterred, I met with the sales manager again right before the next sprint and asked for the next set of clients with renewals. Then the day before the next sprint, I began submitting tickets again. My workday started at 9 a.m. and by 10 a.m. the head of IT runs over to me. He is bug-eyed and asked me how many tickets I was planning on submitting. I told him the same amount as last time. I only had 200 this time, but he didn't know that, and I am pretty sure I saw him break on the inside. I did feel bad at this point, so I said, alternatively, you could just give me access to the database and I could query the data myself. I had the access before noon. The LDR IT says I need to submit tickets for data instead of giving me direct access. I submit hundreds of tickets until they relent and give me access.
Bank won't let me withdraw funds. Okay. English is my first language, and I'm typing on a laptop, so I expect you all to judge this post harshly. I moved from Pennsylvania to Michigan a few years ago and only go home once a year or so. A few years back, I transferred the vast majority of my bank account to Michigan, but they were giving me a hard time about closing the account, and so I withdrew all funds except for $1.31. I haven't touched the account since that time, so 2 years later I get a notice for inactivity, stating that I will be charged $5 if my account remains inactive for 2 years. I spoke with 3 different people on the phone, but they would not let me close out the account without incurring a fee, and since I'm never moving back to that town, I refuse to pay them or add any money to the account. QMC, so I have to interact with the account once every 2 years or else pay you $5. Fine, give me 1 cent, please. When I was there in person last month, I withdrew 1 penny from the account, so now it's good for another 2 years. The attendant definitely gave me a weird look, but at this rate, my account will remain open for the next 260 years. Edit. Grammar. Thanks for calling me out.
Check out my other stupendous videos.